Oh, Sony, you have the keys to the kingdom. The ability to create an R-rated Spidey cinematic universe full of extremely violent villains doing very violent things, with a Spider-Man that can stop the bad guys when needed. So, what do they do with one of the most popular Spider-Man villains / occasional anti-heroes? They make it PG-13! That's pretty much the biggest and largest gripe I have with so many of these Sony villain solo outings. I would actually be on board with a Venom movie, with a solo Venom series even, where he goes up against Null, the symbiote god, and all these other good stuff besides. But you need to make it. Listen. You need to make them R-rated. You have the most violent symbiote that I've ever seen. And he doesn't rip people in half. There's no body dismemberment. There's no limbs flying everywhere in red all over the place. It's because it's PG-13. We can't scare the children. Oh, no! Look, okay? The Spider-Man the Animated TV series, which I mostly missed, but I did watch a couple episodes here and there, that was 30 years ago, right? Over 30 years ago, that show came out. The Spider-Man fans of the Raimi series are 20 years older now. And look at how much those movies made money. You know, those movies, the first two, printed money. They did. People grew up. And those people now have money of their own. Those people would love to go to the box office and see their childhood heroes and villains carnage each other up in blood-splattering R-rated mayhem and excitement. That's how Deadpool was successful. Deadpool 2 was successful. Deadpool 3 was successful. Logan was successful. All 4 rated R successful films. It shows Hollywood that all of the superhero comic book nerds, the millennials, the Gen Xers, and then we've all grown up. We've grown up. We can handle it. You don't need to keep pandering and catering to the kitty cats. If you want to do that, make cartoon shows, TV shows on your streaming services, and give it to the kiddies there. Let them watch those. Put these movies on for us! Now, these two I've had for a while. I picked them up pretty much day one, being such a big Venom fan. You know, I didn't read the comics, but I played video games, and I loved seeing Venom in the video games. He was such a fun guy. And then when I heard about Eddie Brock and how he was actually occasionally an anti-hero who does heroic stuff, but Venom just happens to eat people because that's just what he does. It was extremely entertaining. It was extremely entertaining to read about Eddie Brock and Venom, that when I finally went in to watch Venom, I was entertained, but I was disappointed. I was entertained, but I was disappointed. It's a disappointment factor here that these movies, Morbius also, needed to be rated R. When I was watching Venom 1 especially, and I was watching Morbius, well, I was watching those two movies in particular, I noticed how there were a lot of cutaways, like there were editing changes. Like, clearly there were two different movies that were shot at two different times, and that maybe originally they may have planned to make an R-rated Venom movie with a different tone, and then they decided, no, let's scrap that idea. We'll keep some of what we already did, but let's reshoot some of these, or let's rewrite these scenes, let's PG-13ify it. Let's make our own MCU with the Sony characters. We have to make it as accessible as possible, so we have to make it PG-13. And they ended up disappointing pretty much all of Venom's fans. I liked Venom in the movie itself, the Venom the character, though he was very campy. He was very much like a child at first in this movie. He was like a child. He was like a fish out of water with a lot of stuff in human society, and Eddie Brock has to teach him right from wrong, even though he's kind of in the middle himself. So that was very entertaining. Their dynamic, Tom Hardy's dynamic with the Venom symbiote, is what carries this trilogy. And yes, I do mean a trilogy. We'll get to this one later. The character dynamic of Eddie Brock and Venom is what holds these movies together. I would say the weakest of the three is Let There Be Carnage, even though Let There Be Carnage has the most entertaining fighting at the end. The third act is very entertaining, but the first act and the second act of Venom is very entertaining, especially with Eddie Brock getting to learn about Venom. His acting is very hilarious. He is very funny in these movies. He's not so much as funny as he is in these two and the third one, but we'll get to that. But I like the Dan character, and how Venom and Eddie both hate Dan and they both love Anne. I love that idea. I love that dynamic, and I love how that might have hinted at Dylan Brock someday being thrown in, but we'll get to that later. The Carnage character is the most disappointing thing about Let There Be Carnage. Cletus being played by him, he's fine. I have no problems with the actor. I keep forgetting Woody Harrelson. I have no problems with Woody Harrelson playing Cletus. He does a very fine job. He is perfectly fine in that role, but he doesn't really sell the chemistry with adult Shriek. I can't really see too much with that. But when he was talking about it in the childhood, I could tell that he believes in his love. He sells it, but I don't see it being sold that strongly here. I think that the 20 minutes that were shorter, this one was like 2 hours long. This is like 97 minutes long. I think you should have added that 20 minutes in to give us some more time to focus on Cletus and Carnage. And I definitely think both of these movies should have been rated R. Do not shy away from the violence. Show the violence. Show the body parts flying all over the place. Show the heads being removed from their bodies. And show a fountain splurting up. That entertains people, okay? It entertains people. They love it. They love this stuff. They do. Stop being afraid of it. They love it. The people want to see carnage! But they didn't get it. But it was still an entertaining film, because Tom Hardy's dynamic with Venom keeps the movie grounded. It keeps the movie consistent across the two films, and it really does blend together. After a couple years, I forgot most of the plot to these movies, admittedly. I forgot about the super science-y people, and I forgot about Cletus's love interest and all that stuff. I remembered Carnage and all that stuff, sure, but the scenes from both films kind of blended together a little bit, and I was thinking that some scenes that were in this film were actually in this film, so when I rewatched these two before I watched the third one, I was like, oh wow, so that was actually in this movie instead. And there's a lot of forgettable stuff in here, but there's a lot of memorable stuff in here as well, and that just goes to show what I did remember I thought was a different movie, and what I didn't remember was what didn't work. The super secret, the Life Corporation and all that other stuff, the big CEO man, I think that could have been done a little bit better. I think they definitely should have made Riot more violent. They needed more They needed that R rating. They really did. I mean, there's not too much ways I could say you could improve this movie without an R rating. There's just story-wise, you could fix the Life Corporation and fix the villain to be a bit more better. But what can you do? The villain in this movie is the villain in Ant-Man 1. He's the villain in Iron Man 1. He's just Mr. Science Guy who hates the hero guy. That's basically it. But I do like what happens with Eddie. He's always the guy who's down on his luck. He's living below, all the way at the bottom rungs of society, and he does have a somewhat altruistic side to him. But it might also be sort of a pride thing, that he wants to expose people out of a sort of pride, that he gets the recognition and he takes the bad guy down. Not so much that this is a bad person and we need to take him down just because we need to do that. He has a sort of pride about him, and that pride brought about his fall at the start of the film. So I can I could appreciate what they were trying to do there. They could have done that a little bit better. But from as far as Tom Hardy, the actor Eddie Brock goes, his acting wise, he's fine. He's the best part of the film. Whenever he's on screen, we're having a good time. When we skip to somebody else and he's not there, we're like, all right, come on, let's get back to it. Come on. I'm tired of this. This is all right. We're back to Eddie. All right, and that's kind of how it is in this film as well. But at least Woody Harrelson has the charismatic acting chops to have some screen presence as well. But if only he was given a little bit more to do. So, Let There Be Carnage released in I want to say 2021, 22. Can I get a year, please? 2021. So, Let There Be Carnage released in 2021. About 2 to 3 years later, we get Venom 3, The Last Dance. And since Sony had not just one, not just two, not even three, they were talking about it since the first Venom, which I think was like 2019 or something. They had 5 years of fan feedback of telling them to make it R-rated. So, in Last Dance, they understood the audience feedback. They listened to the audience feedback, and they completely ignored it and went for a PG-13 rating. And of course, the teaser at the end of Venom Let There Be Carnage shows that Tom Hardy was thrown into the MCU in the post-credits scene that made everybody go wild. Will Venom be in the next Spider-Man movie? No, because No Way Home, while it was a roaring major smash hit success, Venom wasn't in that movie. It's probably because there was just too many characters as is, and Venom never really met any of the 3 Peter Parkers before. I think he should have had him meet one before that happened. Maybe the Garfield one. Probably I would say make it the Garfield one for this Venom to meet, and that would definitely be a good idea. But they teased it, and then they ripped it out for you. They ripped it away from you. Venom: The Last Dance opens with him in the MCU in a bar in Mexico, drinking and telling his life story to the barman, and then he gets thrown into another portal, and he's back to his universe, which is dark and dreary. The barman is the same actor, but he's got longer hair, so he leaves a piece of him behind. When he leaves a tip, he leaves a piece of, like a shedding of the symbiote. And then Baron Mordo, who's not Baron Mordo, comes in and collects the piece of the symbiote and says that we can't let these things just go around. They'll just keep making more symbiotes, you know? So, The Last Dance is theoretically, the final film in the Venom trilogy. If the first Venom was Riot, and the second Venom was Carnage, then if you're not going to do Spider-Man, then the next villain is going to obviously be Null. But obviously, like I've said, well, I haven't said it yet, but I've said it before many times outside of on recording. I've said that this film feels like you skipped a movie. It feels like you skipped one or two movies before you made this one. It feels like there should have been a Venom movie set in between Let There Be Carnage and The Last Dance. That one would be the one where Venom meets Spider-Man. You know, the movie where he saw the Spider-Man character, he licked the screen. You know, that could have been a big movie, you know, that could have been a very successful movie, you know, for Sony especially, if they saw how very successful No Way Home was, and how happy Andrew Garfield was to return to play Spider-Man. What if Sony blew everybody's minds by saying they were going to make the Amazing Spider-Man 3 with Venom going to be the villain slash maybe anti-hero with a penultimate villain that they have to team up in the end to fight, and they just end the movie as rivals who have disagreements on how you beat the bad guys, and then they go their separate ways, and then you do The Last Dance. Then you do the last. That would have been a much better film, a quadrilogy. To me, personally, you know, I feel like Spider-Man should have been in between Carnage and Null. I think you're skipping a big stepping stone in the ladder process of villains here. It's like you're going from Obadiah to Thanos. It's like you're skipping a few steps here, buddy, but I said that The Last Dance feels like it's skipping ahead. Like there was a big portion that I feel there should have been in between these two films, and I didn't buy the film by itself. You know, I didn't buy the story and all of that stuff. That it was pretty campy. Now, to be fair, the first film was already discarding plots. Like, remember how I said it feels like two films were shot and they discarded the previous film? In one of the story elements of the first Venom is that the symbiotes are killing their hosts. And then we learn that even Eddie Brock's body is failing and falling apart after being bonded with Venom for so long. And so Anne is saying that you're literally killing him. And then Venom says, I can fix it, yada yada, and they just discard it after that. They just let Venom say, I can fix it, and then they discard that plot line completely. And apparently he does fix it because Eddie Brock is still alive years later. I feel like that should have been tackled a little bit more. I feel like the story should have been refined a little bit more. And of course, it needed to be R-rated. All three of these films needed to be R-rated. The only one that needed to be PG-13 would be Amazing Spider-Man 3. That one you would have made $1 billion easily at the box office, Mr. Sony, but you apparently don't like money, so you didn't choose that option. So I understand that. I understand. You know, sometimes we just don't like money. You know, we like to just throw our money at the screen and watch it fly away. We just like to watch it fly away. And you know, me personally, I wouldn't choose to do that, but I respect your decision to just let it fly away. Not everybody can do that, but so there's no Amazing Spider-Man 3. We have The Last Dance here with Tom Hardy, and I honestly would say I liked it. I did. I liked all three of them, even though I'm griping on all three of them quite a bit. That's because there is a lot to gripe about in all three of these. Even though I like the movie, I could still tear it apart, and I am tearing it apart. There is one good improvement in The Last Dance. At the beginning of the film, Venom and Eddie Brock are in Mexico, and they uncover a dog fighting ring, and Venom gets to eat all 4 of the dog run fighting owner people's heads off, and we actually get to see the heads go away. We get to see them being chopped up. We even get to see a tiny little bit of CG splatter. A tiny, tiny little bit. It's something. It's just a tiny little breadcrumb, but it's something that they didn't even do in these 2 movies. So just by that alone, this one could be the best of the trilogy. It is certainly the most campiest of the trilogy as well. And given how Eddie Brock and Venom's dynamic has been quite comical this entire time, making the film a little bit more campy was a good idea, because the dynamic between these 2 characters definitely fits in that atmosphere a little bit better. Now, there's no Anne Weying, there's no Dylan Brock, but there are some hints here and there. There are some hints here and there of Dylan Brock maybe being in the next one, or the one after the next one, because they have Venom saying to Eddie how he would make a good father someday. They have him making a dynamic with the son of a hippie family. This hippie family is driving to Area 51 to meet the aliens, which just so happens to be where a symbiote army has been collected by the government, and that's where they're headed as well, to go find and they're gonna eventually pick those guys up. So it's a road trip movie. It's not R-rated, so I can't talk about any visceral action or anything like that, but there is some interesting ideas that they do with the Venom character. But since they never gave him Spider-Man, since they never had Venom bond to Spider-Man and have Venom want to actually fight people using powers similar to Spider-Man, and modify his own little symbiote weird powers to look like web shooting and web attacks, and maybe have him put a little spider sign on his chest and all that stuff, instead of doing that, he kind of keeps the powers the exact same as in the previous 2 films, but they do some interesting ideas with it, such as Eddie Brock in his normal human form, and he has tendrils coming out of the back of him, slapping and swiping people away. Sometimes partial arm turns into the Venom hand to punch people, but he doesn't ever go full suited, roided out. Those are some really good ideas. It kind of reminded me of a video game that I played a couple years ago called The Darkness. The first one especially. The second one's also pretty good. Second one's pretty more comic bookish, but they're both really good. It kind of reminded me of that, where you had this sort of entity inside of you, talking inside of your head, and this entity eats people, and I loved that. I would definitely say that could have been that's a pretty good idea, what they did with this movie with that. So that's fine. They also teased Venom taking over a bunch of animals. We get to see Venom in all sorts of animal forms. The Venom horse, the Venom frog, the Venom fish. It's very fun. It's very funny. So that was very entertaining. Baron Mordo as military man. He's not Baron Mordo, but I can't pronounce his name. I'm very sorry, but I don't want to butcher it when I try to say it, so I'm just going to call him Baron Mordo, the military man. It's 2 different characters, but it's the same actor who played Baron Mordo in Doctor Strange. He's a different person in this universe, which makes sense. I'm not gonna gripe on that. There are a lot of actors in this movie that were in other movies, such as the hippie father. He was the Lizard in the first Amazing Spider-Man movie, so that's fun. But I guess that apparently throws out the Amazing Spider-Man universe being the Venom universe, so that's disappointing as well. Maybe they'll make a 4th Spider-Man to be part of the Venom universe. A dark Spider... No, they're probably not going to do that. That'll be too smart! But, yeah, so... the reason why I'm not upset about that is because of Chris Evans. Chris Evans was originally the Human Torch in the Fantastic Four universe in the Fox world. And then, of course, he started to play Captain America in the MCU by Paramount, and then eventually through Disney, he played the Captain America. And then by Deadpool 3, we brought Chris Evans' Human Torch back as a Easter egg, as a joke, as a parody, and it really landed. It really did. And that's why I'm not that upset here, because that the same actor could play different people, because it's a different universes, it's multiverse. Of course that could be a thing, you know. Maybe in another universe Hugh Jackman is Doctor Strange, you know. Yeah. That would be playing against type. But there's all sorts of things that they do with this multiverse crap, and I am both fond and disappointed at what they've been doing with the multiverses, because they just haven't tapped into it in the right fun ways. There are many things you could do to tap into the multiverse. There are tons of movies that you could make to tap into the multiverse, such as a movie where if you teamed up with Disney Marvel, who now owns the Fox side, and we had the Venom Wolverine, or the Venom Hulk, or Deadpool Wolverine, you know, the Deadpool Hulk. I mean the Deadpool Venom pool. That's it. There. I knew I was coming to that word eventually. I was gonna get there. But there's so many ideas. There's so many what-if stories. The Punisher destroys the Marvel. They're never gonna make that one. They're never gonna make that one. But there's so many things that you could do with the multiverse that they're just not doing it. It's like they have the keys to this majestic, infinite possibilities, and they fumbled. They fumbled it really. They fumbled it coming out the door. The only time it actually worked for me was in No Way Home. Doctor Strange 2 was okay, honestly, but Doctor Strange felt like a sidekick in his own movie, and I didn't really like that. I thought he should have been the main focus. He should have been the one hopping the dimensions. He should have been built up a little bit better. Maybe give America Chavez her own TV series or something like that. I don't know, but it could have been better. And then I didn't watch the Marvels. I didn't watch that. But the multiverse, it had a really good idea at the start. And of course, the multiverse really worked at Deadpool Wolverine. I loved that movie. That was fantastic. It was amazing. You need to not take it so seriously. But obviously, you could see me going off topic all over the place instead of talking about The Last Dance. It's mainly because, well, it's more of what you've seen, but it's campier. So if you've seen these two, you've seen this one. It's just campier. It shows a couple new Venom attacks, obviously. And at the end, the third act, which is very entertaining, is very fun, it kind of gets a little Super Sentai-ish, and it kind of throws all previous logic of the previous two films out the window. It throws it out the window by having all of these symbiotes just randomly bond to a bunch of random people, and we get to see all sorts of symbiotes with all sorts of different cool powers. It's a sort of Easter egg. We have a superhero team of symbiotes with all sorts of different colors. I almost expected them to do a fighting pose. But obviously, I was very entertained by that. It was so campy and dumb that I was like, go for it. Go all in on this cheese. But they didn't go all in on the cheese. But it was still very entertaining. It was still a very entertaining thing. Most of the symbiotes die, sadly. And a lot of people just casually die in this final bit there. And that's disappointing. The Venom character does die at the end of this movie. Because at the end of Let There Be Carnage, Tom Hardy's Eddie Brock dies by being impaled by Carnage's attack. Venom brings him back to life, and apparently in this universe, when a symbiote brings their host back to life like that, they create what is known as a codex. And this codex is what is needed for the symbiote god Null, that is Knull, Null, to break free of the prison that the symbiotes have placed him in. So he's sending his xenophages, which are these big beasties that just come after you. They can heal. They have a healing factor. You can come to pieces, but they'll heal. So he sends those guys after Venom to capture the Codex. And as Venom explains to Eddie Brock, the only way to destroy the Codex is for one of them to die. And at this point, after 2 movies, they've gotten really fond of each other, and they don't want the other person to die. So they both choose to just go out on the run. So long as Venom doesn't fully vamp out, the Codex won't activate and become a homing beacon. But at the end of the film, Venom decides to sacrifice himself to save Eddie Brock and everybody else at Area 51 by destroying himself and the xenophages that Null sent to retrieve him. Then we have a post-credit scene. There's 2 of them, but the one after the second post-credit scene, at the very end, we see a broken vial on the ground and a cockroach. Now this is symbolism because there's a writing trope known as the Chekhov's gun, and a lot of people tend to do this really well. A lot of people tend to do it really poorly, but this time I think it's done pretty well because they don't overtly tell you that Venom's okay. But the film has 2 particular Chekhov's guns that I want you to pay attention to. At the start of the film, I did say that Baron Mordo, who's not Baron Mordo, picks up a vial of one of Venom's sheddings. It's a living symbiote shedding. It's a tiny little black piece. And it's in a vial. And he takes it back to Area 51. And then, while he's in Area 51, he's talking to a random scientist lady who explains that even after all of this is gone, the roaches will still be around. And Baron Mordo goes like, what are you talking about? And it says, well, the roaches have been around for like 180 million years, 380 million years. They're going to be around for another 380 million years. They'll survive nuclear apocalypses. They are very resistant to all sorts of things. Yada, 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 yada. So, the theory at the end of the movie, at the end of the second post-credits scene, is going by those 2 Chekhov's guns. The broken vial could have contained the piece of venom that was shedded off at the start of the film, and the cockroach could be possessed by that shard of venom. Now, we've seen a similar idea happen in Venom Let There Be Carnage, of course. Venom's offspring was a piece of him that Cletus bit off of Eddie Brock, and the reason why Carnage was red, blood red, was probably because it was a piece of his symbiote mixed with blood that made him blood red and all that stuff. So maybe that's how they did that idea there. But who knows how Venom's gonna come back in the 4th movie? Is it gonna be an offspring of Venom, and it's not actually gonna be this Venom? Who knows? Is this offspring of Venom going to possess a different host? Probably not. It may end up coming back to Eddie, but it may be a different Venom. It may be like a child of Venom that Eddie has to raise and teach all this stuff all over again, maybe. And that could be a good idea. And maybe by that 4th film, Eddie could have a child, Dylan Brock. And maybe we could set that up. And maybe, even just maybe, that Dylan Brock could be the son of Anne Weying, and we could find Anne end up being mysteriously pregnant despite her and Eddie not having done the deed in years, probably because of Venom. When Venom transferred from Eddie to her, and from her back to him, and then from him back to her multiple times, he may have left a piece of himself inside Anne, which also left a piece of Eddie's DNA inside Anne, and ended up creating a human symbiote hybrid that she would give birth to. That would be a pretty cool idea. I just gave you a story idea, Sony. Don't credit me, just do it. Just make the Dylan Brock story. Let's make the Null Saga. Come on, you have a new trilogy of movies ready to do. I don't care if you do the symbiote Super Sentai again. That's crampy as crap, but it was entertaining too. Just do it. Come on, it'll be fun.